So I just wanted to discuss ESEA's Season 51 league structure, both through this blog post, but in particular, the motivating factor here is this playoff structure announcement. Um, and I'll just go kind of point by point at the front end of this blog post to structure the discussion. So, getting right into it, first point here, making Open more accessible to players taking their first competitive step by automatically fast-tracking full level 10 teams out of Open to a new higher Open 10 division. So in theory, I really like this. There really was beforehand no way to play recreationally as a completed 5 before entering the league. I think all the other options, as far as truly recreational environments go, involved you signing up as a solo or duo, playing a combine, ending up with a new team every season, which is all well and good. But if you do want to play, casually and recreationally in a league environment with 4 of your friends, then there really wasn't an option for that. And I think ESEA is trying to create this with this new open division. And why I say fully recreational has to do with the playoff structure here. ESEA Open, despite what this visual might suggest here in terms of going open to open 10, we'll talk about what this arrow probably means actually later. There's really no way for you to move up from ESEA Open. You quite literally have to be top 4 in open in a single elimination playoff bracket to make it to any move up at all. And those first to 4 slots all go to IM. So if you're playing ESEA Open, at least in Season 51, maybe they'll change it moving forward. There really is no avenue to move up. No realistic avenue to move up. You have to achieve quite a run. Comparing that to Open 10 and their playoff structure and the amount of teams that are moving up, Open 10 is basically the exact same as old Open seasons were in terms of the allotment of teams that are moving up. It's very similar. So what Open 10 really is now is old Open, and then they're making kind of, a noob league under that, which I think is actually quite good. Where I have some comments is having to do with what teams are in Open 10 and ensuring from ESEA's standpoint that all of your customers that do want to interact with the right part of this visual and moving up to IM main and advanced and having that avenue get into Open 10 even if they don't have 5 level 10 players. The motivating factor here is that to get into Open 10 you either have to have that 5 level 10 player base, or you have to create a support ticket to make your entry, your open registration be moved to Open 10. Just in general, I've got the Open Season 50 placements pulled up here, and it's not going to be every team that doesn't meet this requirement. For example, this team right here that finished 33rd to 64, so they would have qualified to IM, had 5 level 10s, they would have gotten moved to Open 10 automatically. And the kind of the noob league, the recreational league, would have gotten insulated from that team, poke stomping them, right? However, a team like this, even a team that has so many different players, has 4 level 10 players, which would not automatically move them up, at least how it's described in this blog post, where it says 5 teams of where teams of 5 or more level 10 players will automatically be fast tracked. So that team wouldn't automatically move up. This team would. This team would not. There are some examples of teams just, from me scrolling through before recording, that was level 4 level 10s that, actually only have maybe 1 to 2 level 10s, in some cases no level 10s, but they were still good enough to make it to IM through open playoffs. I think in general, you would want pretty much all of these teams, as well as some of the teams that narrowly missed IM, like all these 129th to 150th. All of these teams are probably also teams you would generally want. Like, for example, this team. Do we really want this team playing for absolutely no stakes? Probably not, right? We also probably don't want them beating up on noobs either. This team is not going to be too far from, a 5 level 10 team in terms of their performance against new players to structural Counter-Strike. So where I'm getting at there is not that I think the structure here is bad, but I would definitely, if I was ESEA, advertise the hell out of the fact right here that you like, if you want to play old open, if your idea of ESEA open exists season 50 and prior, you need to make the support ticket to get yourself into Open 10, or you are basically, as I've kind of described here, playing for absolutely no stakes all season. I can envision a future in which a lot of ESEA players do not bother reading this blog post. They sign up for ESEA Open, and they are caught off guard by the fact that like Open does not move up really at all. Especially if they looked at this graphic, they might say, "Oh, well, we don't have 5 level 10s, but we can move up to Open 10 through doing decent in playoffs and regular Open." That's not the case either. So I would say either revamp what the support ticket like the support ticket methodology here to the point where people can actually just register for Open 10 if they want to. Um, I don't know if there's enough time to do that before this season, but I would definitely recommend that for next season. Um, and I would maybe also consider what automation looks like with regards to moving up to Open 10, whether it's an average, elo of level 10 or higher, an average elo of level 9 or level 8 or higher. I would just basically warn against a future that might include a lot of good teams that thought that they were going to be playing for stakes, not playing for stakes at all because they didn't realize they had to make the support ticket, or they didn't even know that they could make the support ticket. I would do a lot of advertising on this front. I don't know how many ESEA players are digging into these blog posts, especially on the open level. So that'd be my recommendation to kind of make sure that this open 10 dynamic works out the way we want it to. Moving on to the next bullet point here of a new playoff structure. So every regular season match is meaningful and gives team additional opportunities to move up. So I'll just bring up the playoff structure here for ESEA Open 10. I'm quite fond of how this looks. I think ESEA Open 10 probably gets somewhere between 200 to 300 teams if people realize that they can make the support ticket. I think if people don't realize the support ticket exists, ESEA might be kind of shocked at how little teams show up here. Obviously, the new system is incentivizing a lot of teams to make 5 level 10s if they don't realize that they can just support ticket their way to Open 10. But in a world where everyone's kind of well informed, I think ESEA Open 10 probably gets 200 to 300 teams, if not maybe a little more. So I don't think the fact that 64 teams here and an additional 48 teams are being moved up is going to be a problem. I think the playoff size relative to the amount of teams moving up is probably appropriate. Where I have worries has to do with IM, but we'll start by just describing ESEA Open 10's structure. So top 48 teams advance to playoff A, top 48 regular season teams, that is. All 48 are making IM, top 8 make main, and then the top 1 make advanced. Playoff B, as far as I can tell, generally the ESEA wants the rest of Open 10 to be entered in this bracket, or a large majority of Open 10, the remaining teams in Open 10 to make this bracket. And then they're going to play out this bracket until the top 64 teams are decided. I really like this structure. We're not wasting time with unnecessary playoff matches. Everyone understands the stakes. The prize is IM. It's not, we're not including some, a long shot to make main a top 1 that is wasting a lot of teams' times in between their qualification between IM and that first place, for example. So I really only have of good things to say about this structure. I think this very well accomplishes giving the regular season some additional meaning while also getting people more bang for their buck with regards to their ESEA League Pass. I think this is quite good. I have nearly the opposite to say about IM. How IM is structured, Playoff A has the same kind of stakes as Playoff A from Open, in that everyone who makes this top 32 regular season achievements in Intermediate is automatically moving up to main, and then the winner makes Advanced. Playoff B, however, unlike Open's Playoff B, really has a lot of teams playing for nothing. There is only one spot out of this 96-team double elimination playoff bracket that means anything. You have to get first to make main, or you are just wasting your time. I think it's pretty easy to imagine a team might fall into losers midway through the bracket, and you play, I don't know, anywhere between 6 to 8 maybe matches to make that grand final, depending on when you fall into losers, and then you can lose that grand final and win all those matches to end up just an IM next season again, even with all of that achievement. So that's a problem, in my opinion. I think this playoff bracket is way too big to have a winner-take-all system, especially when I think stakes should be generally balanced. And if you're playing IM, you don't have the same motivation as an open player where you're just cool playing matches to play matches. IM players are really Open 10 players and up are going to want to have reasonable stakes and a reasonable playoff bracket. So I think this is a problem, and I think the bigger problem, in my opinion, is the fact that if you are playing Open, right, your motivation can be to make this playoff A bracket, But if you make the playoff A bracket, you have additional motivation to try to make main. And if you don't make the playoff A bracket, you still have a reasonable shot to make IM through playoffs. ESEA Intermediate is not like that at all. You really only care about making this top 32 regular season. All that matters from an IM player's perspective through this structure is making playoffs A at all. Like that's all that matters. All that matters is regular season matches. If you go, 13-1, 12-2, or 11-3, you're probably good enough for this playoff A bracket. And at that point, you can just mail the season end unless you are a team that really thinks they can win this 32-team bracket to make advanced. And then the second you're 33rd and below, you're 33rd to 96, your season's basically over. Like, it's so unreasonable to imagine any one team making this run to just get this one main slot out of playoff B. So to kind of compare and contrast, Open has a regular season that rewards good players, good teams by making IM automatically, while still providing reasonable, attainable achievement through the playoff bracket. The playoff B bracket also has achievable, attainable IM move up opportunities. So whether you did good or whether you did bad in the regular season, both of those kind of situations are, I think, equally rewarded and equally punished because this playoff B bracket is going to be large. There's going to be a lot of games you need to play to make this top 64. It's not going to be like an easy run, don't get me wrong. But it's a hell of a lot easier than winning a 96-team playoff bracket for one main spot. So I think ESEA Open has cracked a good balance between a regular season that means something and a playoff bracket that still needs effort and still has attainable goals within those brackets. IM currently places nearly 100% of the season's importance on the regular season, and then even if you're in playoff A, number one is pretty unattainable for most teams. And if you're in playoff B, your only reward is number one, and that's extremely unattainable for most teams. So that would be my critique here. As far as trying to repair this ESEA intermediate situation, I would say that at the very least, you're going to want to decrease the amount of free main playoff berths. I would maybe experiment with just top 8, make main automatically, and then the number one team out of that 8 bracket makes advanced. If you want to, maybe 16 teams make main, and then that one makes advanced, and then mess around with the numbers here in playoff B to fill as many main spots as you want to from that point on. I just think that as it currently stands, ESEA Intermediate is a big problem in incentives for the players themselves. If the discussion can kind of turn to cap off this discussion about playoff structure, it can turn to how we value regular season versus playoffs. In terms of the importance of regular season matches, I don't think it's going to surprise anyone to say that a lot of teams don't take regular season matches nearly as seriously as playoffs. And also, it's a completely different format, right? You could reasonably do good in the regular season only playing 3 to 4 maps, and I see it all the time. And doing preparing for playoff matches or preparing for regular season matches, there are teams that only play 3 maps all season, and they never are tested on a 4th map. They're never tested on a potential punish pick, and that just generally means that best of ones are a completely different game than best of threes a lot of the time. Just kind of use an example as well as teams that can do really well in the regular season and then flunk out in playoffs. Do we want that to mean something? How much do we want that to mean? Just an example here, Penizoid went 13-1 in the main regular season, went into the main playoffs with a 1 seed, immediately lost in the winner's bracket, and then won 2 matches here, and then lost before they made advanced. So the team that went 13-1 in the regular season of main did not make advanced, did not make top 8 in that playoff bracket. Right now, that exact environment would be like awarding an IM team that did exactly that a spot automatically in ESEA main, and the same thing goes for Open. So I don't know. I don't know how ESEA feels about the importance between regular season and playoffs. My personal opinion is that right now, all that matters in IM is regular season, and I think that's not a good balance. Whereas I think both regular season and playoffs matter in Open 10 to a healthy degree. And I think that they should more closely replicate whatever proportionate values are in Open 10 onto Intermediate. Like I said before, this could be top 8 make main, top 16 make main, and then add more main slots, more reasonable attainment for that playoff B bracket. Even if you have to make the playoff B bracket smaller, that would be my feedback. Final point on these initial 4 bullet points here is on the 4th one, which states qualifying high skill teams to Intermediate main and advance faster to avoid wasting time stomping Open/Open 10. And my comment here is that I believe how the playoff structure is laid out is actually contradictory to this statement. And I'll pull up last season move up and move downs to convey that. So I've pulled up last season's and that season 50's ESEA move up and move down process. As you can see here, as far as move up goes, Open was moving up 128 teams, IM was moving up 32 teams, and main was moving up 8 teams. The relevant piece of information here is particularly the Open move ups. This final bullet point I'll just kind of reiterate says qualifying high skill teams to IM main and advance faster to avoid wasting time stopping Open 10. If we want to get teams out of Open that are too good to be in Open, whether it's Open or Open 10, and move them into IM main and advanced. Taking a look here, you can see I create a small table here. Open last season had 128 teams move up. This 116 number for season 51 comes from 1 advanced, 7 main, 104 IM teams. This is from the playoff structure listed here for Open 10. An additional 4 teams here in Open move up to IM, and then you have the qualifiers that I'm adding in as well. But in general, season 51 moves 116 teams from Open and Open 10 to Intermediate or higher, which is less than last season. So in terms of this effort saying that they want to qualify more high skill teams to Intermediate, main, and advanced faster, I don't really know how they can justify writing that when they're qualifying less teams out of Open to higher divisions in season 51 than they have in the past. Just numerically, maybe they expect less teams to register next season. I kind of doubt that, but percentage wise, 116 could be equivalent to 128 in the future seasons if less teams register. But yeah, I would say that to kind of conclude this point, if they are only referring to moving teams out of Open to Open 10 with this bullet point, it would kind of be, double tracking on this first bullet point. But I really have no complaints. Like, if that's what they mean by this bullet point, that's fine. But specifically saying that they want to qualify more teams from Open and Open 10 to Intermediate, main, and advanced, I think that it's just unfortunately not the case that their system does that this season. So that'll be the end of my critiques regarding ESEA Season 51's playoff structure, as well as some critiques on these kind of goals as well. And this is going to be moving on into kind of more of a discussion about the equilibrium that should arise from limiting main and advanced to 64 and 192 teams. So we'll just get started here. What this spreadsheet kind of aims to do is communicate an equilibrium that is created when you structure playoffs like this and have the allotment of move ups and move downs that we currently have. So the important part here is the discussion about how many teams in advanced and main are safe from relegation and how many are in danger of relegation. I'm assuming that IM will stay roughly the same, in which you win 3 games, you get relegated, you win 4 games, you stay, or you have some kind of cutoff point there between relegation and not relegation based off of win total. Main and advanced will no longer be based on win total. They're going to be based on how many slots the division needs to fill, and then in exchange remove teams for that purpose. So what this spreadsheet does is basically say, okay, advanced needs to move down 11 teams to main. Why is that? Well, you have 8 teams moving up from main. You have another team moving up from IM. You have another team moving up from Open 10. Those are all through their playoffs. You have 1 team making it to advance from the ESEA Face It tournament qualifier. And then you have, in this case, we're going to use an example of an ECL relegation season. You have 1 team being relegated to ECL down to advanced. And that makes up a total of 12, and then you can subtract the one team from advanced that makes ECL to pull it down back to 11, which means we need to make room for 11 teams in advanced, which means the bottom 11 teams in advanced have to move down to main. Same thing is true right here for this 46 number. That is summing up the 4 teams from the qualifiers that make main, the 7 teams from Open 10 that make main, the 32 teams from IM that make main, and then you're also adding in the 11 teams that are now moving down from advanced. So you have to make room for those 11 teams as well. You can then subtract the 8 teams from main that move up to advanced from the main playoffs, and then that will be the end of your total, which means you need to make room for 46 teams in main, which means the bottom 46 teams get relegated, leaving 138 previously main teams the allotment of being able to stay. So what I've then done with those numbers is communicated, incoming teams, 54, outgoing teams has to stay the kind of exact same there for main and advanced both. And then you can isolate the relegated teams from that point. So in this case, 46 plus 8, that's how you get the 54 there. You have the 11 plus the 1, that's how you get the 12 here. And just, as a percentage of the total league, how many teams are we relegating every season? In the case of ECL, every other season, just a 6.25%. Really not even fair for the discussion here, but I thought I'd include it. Advanced is relegating 17.2% of its teams every season, and main relegating basically 24% of their teams every season. I just wanted to present this. I don't know, how many teams are currently relegated based on record alone as a percentage of the league. I did a quick calculation with regards to last season's dead teams on both advanced and main. So in season 50, as far as I can tell, what I did here was I went to team standings regular season, and I just scrolled down till I got to what appeared to be the dead team section. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong here, but even if teams had 3-2 wins, in this case, actually a 4-10 team is also down here that presumably also died. So, the amount of dead teams here is conveyed by this 23 number for main, and I did the same for advanced. That was 8 teams. I took that 23 divided by the total of 137 to get 17%. And what that means is last season, 17% of all main teams died before the season ended, which would mean that they would be relegated down to, open, right? I mean, all those players basically do not have a main or an IM slot at that point, I think. In any case, they definitely don't have a main slot anymore. And the same is true for advanced. They had 8 dead teams, took that divided by 80 because there was 80 advanced teams last season. So that's 10%. And then just creating kind of an expected dead team equilibrium from that point would result in 6 out of the 64 teams in the future advanced seasons being dead every season. And then that same number for main is 32. That's 17% of 192 rounds down to 32 teams, which means that of the 46 teams that we know we need to relegate to make spots for IM move-ups, main move-ups, IM move-ups, open move-ups, and qualifier move-ups, as well as advanced move down, only 14 of those active teams are actually being relegated. And the same principle can be applied to advanced. We're in need of relegating 11 teams, but 6 of them we can expect to be dead in any one season. So only the bottom 5 active teams are being relegated. I don't know what ESEA's attitude is towards an acceptable amount of active teams to be relegating, the acceptable amount of total teams to be relegating, the percentage of total teams to be relegating. But I just thought I'd communicate these numbers. I think as a personally, probably like 5 seasons now, just like playing main, a truly like hard stuck main environments, like I think is like even more likely now, which is maybe something that they didn't plan on. But, in past ESEA seasons, right, when the dead team rule was applied very quickly, right? So like, let's say this Stay Frosty team, they're 06, right? So they died and did not have a match scheduled after game 6, which means eight opportunities to be scheduled against this team were forfeited. You would have a lot of teams that could still reasonably go, 3 wins, 2 wins, 4 wins, even if they were active, because they wouldn't be scheduled against dead teams. So even if you were an active team, it was very reasonable, or I shouldn't say very reasonable, it's very reasonably possible for you to get relegated. But when you change relegation from win total to an amount of teams, which is what ESEA has done, you're kind of allowing a lot of active rosters to survive this process by dead teams taking that buffer of required teams away. So that's kind of an interesting nuance on the league structure going forward, is that dead teams will impact how many active rosters get moved down. So just as a kind of wrap up and conclusion to this discussion, point one is I think the open 10 structure, both in playoffs and in kind of concept, is good. I would very much encourage ESEA to do a lot more advertising around this support ticket option, and also do more advertising around clearing up the stakes of playing open and open 10, because like I've said, open is just a recreational division. There's almost no opportunities for move ups. You need to make sure that everyone who wants to move up is playing open 10 and firing the support ticket, or change the support ticket to just an option to register for open 10 instead, or rebrand open 10 away from open 10 and just say, like, I don't know, like real open, and then like open gets changed to recreational or something like that. Just make sure that all the teams that want to be moved up are playing open 10, and as many teams as possible. Secondly, with regards to the playoff structure, I think ESEA Open 10 has an awesome playoff structure that basically accomplishes all the goals set out in this bullet point. I think IM does nearly the exact opposite, for the basic reason that all that matters in IM is the regular season now. And once you make these playoffs, in general, the next step, attainability, once you're in playoffs, is very unattainable. You make playoffs, it's very hard to get main from playoffs B. You make playoffs A, and it's also very hard to get advanced from playoff A. So you play regular season, you have your main, or you don't have your main, and then from there, it's probably just over for your team in terms of playing for a purpose. And lastly, this was a small point, but this final bullet point about qualifying more high skill teams to intermediate, main, and advanced out of open. There are less slots in IM main and advanced from open 10 and open combined this season than there were in season 50. So I don't know really how you can justify this exact bullet point and this exact statement when the amount of teams qualifying from open 10 and IM, or sorry, from open 10 and open directly contradicts that statement.